Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over Tropical Storm Claudette or potential Tropical Storm Claudette. Currently it's just Invest 92L, but it does have the potential to grow into a high-end tropical depression or maybe even a tropical storm. The bigger issue with this is going to be the rain throughout parts of Louisiana, Alabama, into parts of Mississippi and Florida as well. And that's just going to be one of the bigger issues where we could be dealing with maybe over 6 inches or even over 10 inches of rainfall. So we're going to be timing this out for you guys, giving you all the information you need to know about this storm. Also, just a quick note for the upload times, because this is practically my last day of school, or yesterday was my last day of school pretty much, so I won't have any of those uploads later on in the day. So most of my uploads will go from 1:30 in the afternoon Eastern time to more around 9 to probably 11 in the morning Eastern time. So they'll be earlier. Just a little bit of a note on when my uploads will be. So again, they will be a little bit earlier. That's just because I'm, of course, the summer break. I don't have any more school, so I can upload earlier and then go on with the rest of my days. So uploads will also be a little bit earlier this summer, and starting tomorrow, we're going to definitely go into a earlier upload schedule. So here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like. As you can see, we have some excessive heat warnings in effect for parts of the Southwest, so that includes parts of California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. And then we have heat advisories also scattered throughout parts of the Southwest, and another pocket of heat advisories in parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa as well. We have air quality alerts scattered throughout the central and eastern part of the country in that gray color, and then we have some red flag warnings for fire danger in parts of Montana, Wyoming, and Utah. We have some flood advisories and watches in effect for southernmost Florida, and some hydraulic issues or some hydraulic advisories, I believe, in parts of Georgia and also central Alabama. Yesterday we had a high temperature in Death Valley, California of 125 degrees, and that was also tied with Stovepipe Wells, California at 125 degrees. And then to the north in parts of Oregon and northern California, that's where we had the low temperatures. We had it tied between three areas: 12 miles northeast of Sand Creek Station, Oregon, Foster Flat, Oregon, and 20 miles east southeast of Old Station, California. All those areas got to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. The highest rainfall report was in Hutchinson Island South in Florida, where they got 5.37 inches of rainfall, and there were no snowfall reports yesterday. So here's what the 5-day outlook looks like, and you can see that we're expecting this storm to develop mostly making the actual center of the low pressure should make landfall probably somewhere in western Louisiana, or maybe even into Texas. So that's the area that it should make landfall with. But if you're looking at the area with the most impacts, it's going to be to the east of the storm, right in this area. So we will have the most impacts, mainly just from rain. I don't think this is going to be a big wind producer, although it will be gusty at times. Maybe you might have a few winds at times getting up near 30 miles per hour. But again, it won't be the winds that's going to be the big issue. It's going to be the rain, and that's why we need to pay attention a lot more to the track than we would normally do for just any other tropical system that's not going to look to be too strong, because of the amount of rainfall that could happen. A few miles here and there that the model shift could drastically impact the forecast for millions of people. So we really need to get it precise on where exactly that's going to locate and where exactly that's going to landfall, because of all the flooding implications with this event. So taking a look at where this is centered, it's currently at 21 degrees north by 93 degrees west. Has maximum winds at 25 knots or 29 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,008 millibars, so it is still fairly weak, and a radius of circulation of 180 nautical miles. So it is a broader storm. The main area of circulation and the bulk of the higher winds are going to be on the eastern side. So somewhat like this is what the wind field looks like as of right now. Just to give you an idea of where it's located, it's 171 miles west of the state of Yucatan, Mexico. It's also 220 miles northeast of Allende, Mexico, and it's 643 miles offshore or to the south of New Orleans, Louisiana. So it is getting closer to the Gulf Coast. Yesterday it was about 800 miles to 900 miles away. Now it's only 643 miles away. So every single day we get maybe 100 to 200 miles closer to the coast, and it will eventually start to ramp up here, and I actually forgot to change the name here. So this is not post-tropical storm Bill, it's Invest 92L, which could be potentially tropical storm Claudette. So yeah, that is located in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico as of right now. If we're looking at what the current satellite imagery looks like, you can see that we have the Gulf Coast up here to the north. So that landmass to the north, that is Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and that's the Gulf Coast in general. And then as you get to the south, this is Mexico's landmass right here. So you can see it's kind of right in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. It's located right in here. You can see a fairly broad area of circulation. Again, most of the convection is actually on the eastern end of this storm. And also something that might break this apart is that we do have some thunderstorms happening in the eastern and central Gulf of Mexico, and that is helping to break apart this system just a little bit. We also have a few more storms popping up right along the coast, along the western coast of the Gulf of Mexico, so that could also cause a few issues depending on exactly how this does track. And then of course we do have some wind shear up to the north, so up to the north we could have a few issues with the storm breaking apart as it heads closer to the coast. Here's a look at the model guidance on where this will track, and you can see this is pretty split. We have pretty much 50-50 on how exactly this will play out. About 50% of the models have this making landfall into southeastern Louisiana, or maybe even into parts of Mississippi, Alabama, or Florida, and the other 50% of the models have this going into Texas. Either way, it looks like somewhere within the state of Louisiana is going to be the bullseye for rainfall, because again, it's not going to be exactly where this landfalls where you're going to have the most rainfall or the most impacts. It's going to be just to the east of there. So on the west end of this landfall, you're probably not going to have too many issues. You might still see a little bit of rainfall, 2 or 3 inches, but it will not be like on the eastern end of this event where we could have maybe close to half a foot or even more of a rainfall. And we're going to discuss that a little bit more later on in today's video. Looking at a few other model track guidance, you can see that the GFS ensemble model is still taking this fairly centered into Louisiana. Maybe a few models bring this into Mississippi as a landfall, then curves out into the southeast and then up along the east coast. Again, potentially we could have a bit of redevelopment on the other side of the Atlantic as it gets closer to the mid-Atlantic and the northeast. But again, that's an issue for another 4 or 5 days out. We still are too far away to really tell exactly how this will track and whether this will even impact those areas. If we look at the European ensemble model guidance, you can see these ones are much more centered to the west. So these models, the European models, are expecting a landfall mainly on the western half of Louisiana, or also into eastern Canada as well. So it's much more centered within here as opposed to what the GFS was showing, where it was much more centered within this area for the landfall. So we do have a bit of discrepancy here, and we've seen a lot of shift within many different models, and the problem is that they did not shift all in the same way. They did not all shift to the west or all shift to the east. They kind of just went their own separate ways. So now we're actually have less information on exactly where this is going to track than yesterday. So really a difficult situation here in terms of actually figuring out where this will track. I think this will most likely make landfall with Louisiana, but again, which side of Louisiana does it make landfall on, and that'll have a big impact on who gets the heaviest rainfall out of this. Looking at the intensity guidance, you can see it's not expected to become too strong. At most, this could potentially become a weekend tropical storm, but we are expecting this to most likely just stay in tropical depression status. They might name this tropical depression Claudette if it does have enough rotation on the satellite imagery, and if it of course becomes a tropical storm, then they will 100% name that. So we might be able to cross off another name on the list. That's the only reason to really look at this intensity guidance for the storm, because the wind speeds are not expected to be the big deal here. At most, you might have a few wind gusts up to 35 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour. So it's not going to be the winds that are going to be the big issue. It's more of the rainfall. Looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies, this is showing you how much above or below normal the actual sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico are. The oranges and reds are showing that we have above normal sea surface temperatures all throughout parts of the Gulf of Mexico, but we do have a few patches in the southwestern and northeastern Gulf of Mexico where we're near normal or maybe even touching a little bit below normal. in terms of the sea surface temperatures right now. If we look at what that means for the actual temperatures in Celsius, we're looking at right around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, even up near 30 degrees Celsius, closer to the coast. So that would be around 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit in terms of the actual water temperatures. It's fairly warm out there, so that's definitely not one of the things that will be holding this system back. If we look at the ocean heat content, the OHC, you're dealing with heavier or higher values in these yellow and red colors, but we don't have a ton of OHC in the waters right now. It's more constrained to the Caribbean, where we have the higher numbers. But going through the Gulf of Mexico, OHC is not going to be a big factor in this. It might give it a little bit of a boost, but I don't think it'll be able to upwell as much of that as typically if we had a bigger reserve in the waters. If we look at the wind shear right now, we are expecting wind shear to be coming out of the west and continue to move into the Gulf Coast, and then eventually kind of dive down into parts of Georgia and Florida. We have that system by this point. This is just a snapshot of Friday morning, and you can see we have that low pressure right in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. We have that wind shear to the north, and it's going to have to fight through that wind shear. It does look like we could potentially see a little bit of strengthening, actually, if this trough can kind of angle itself a little bit further to the southeast. If this can kind of just ride up the trough and move right like this, it can definitely become some sort of extratropical system with a little bit stronger wind gusts, and that could potentially be one of the reasons why some of these models have this as a tropical storm. If that does not happen, and if it's under the trough, which by the way the trough is angled like this right now, if it's underneath the trough, it will have to fight against the wind shear. So if that does happen, then we could see weakening of this system, although again rain is the big issue. It's not really the wind, so the wind shear, and again, these type of parameters aren't going to play as much of a factor in this type of system. One of the big things that you want to look at is the relative humidity, especially higher up in the atmosphere, to give you an idea of how much moisture is actually stored up in the atmosphere. You can see that we have much drier conditions on the west side of this. This is a snapshot of Saturday morning, so you're dealing with a landfall on this model somewhere in southeastern Louisiana, and you can see that we have a lot of drier and actually chillier air being pulled down through Texas, where you might not even see close to any rainfall. Maybe along the immediate coast you get a little bit of rainfall, but you go further inland, and you're not dealing with a lot of rainfall out of this. However, you get on the eastern end of this, and this is where we're dealing with that moisture coming straight out from Mexico, through the Gulf of Mexico, and then into parts of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. So all these areas have a relatively high amount of moisture just kind of being funneled straight through the Gulf of Mexico and into this area. So that is one of the ways that we're going to be able to get a lot of that rainfall in these areas. If we look at the amount of dust in the atmosphere, the Saharan dust, you can see that we have in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, and I'll change the color of the pen here, you can see that we do have some decent values in terms of the amount of Saharan dust, which will help break apart the system, although as it heads into the northern Gulf of Mexico, we really don't have much of a reserve of Saharan dust, so really not much of that is going to be a big factor, and it's not going to really help break this apart. If we look at the maximum wave height with this, on the eastern end of this is going to be more significant and prevalent. You get on the western end, and you can see right along the coast, you're dealing with wave heights maybe about 6 feet high at times, so it's not going to be huge, although you probably don't want to be swimming on Friday and Saturday. Maybe wait until Sunday or Monday to go swimming in the ocean because of course rip currents and the higher than normal wave heights, but you can see especially through parts of Florida and Alabama, that's where the wave heights are going to be the highest, maybe closer to 8 to 12 feet in some of these areas. So these are going to be higher wave heights, and then of course as they come to shore, they won't be as high as out to sea, but still we are dealing with rather high wave heights in many of these areas, especially as this storm heads through. And one of the reasons is because you're going to have a strong southeasterly wind coming right on shore. The reason that on the west end of this we're not dealing with as high of wave heights is because you're dealing with a northwesterly wind knocking against the waves, so it's going the opposite direction, meaning that the waves are of course going to be lower in height. And now starting to talk about the rainfall. This is probably going to be one of the bigger issues with this event, and we're going to look at at two different models and two different outcomes to what could happen. So in the reds, in that red color, that's what we're dealing with, 2 to 5 inches of rain. And then in the brown and the white and even up near those purplish colors, that's where we're dealing with 5 to even 10 or more inches of rainfall. So going through Monday night, you can see that we have rainfall values that are all throughout parts of the southeast above 2 inches in many of these areas. And then even as you're getting closer to the Gulf Coast, maybe up near 5 to 7 inches of rainfall. So and that could definitely cause some flooding, especially because we have saturated grounds already in those areas. We already have a surplus of rainfall for the year, and that definitely won't, we really don't need any more of this rain. We already have our averages up near normal, so getting any more rainfall really is not going to help at all. We really don't have any drought issues throughout the southeast. We're pretty much fine in terms of rainfall, so adding more rainfall probably will cause more issues just in terms of flooding. And then if we look at the GFS model, so we just looked at the European model. Here's the GFS, and you can see that the GFS is a little bit further to the west, so it has that landfall more around central or western Louisiana. But again, even though it landfalls in central or western Louisiana, look at where the rainfall is. It's actually to the east of there. So you go into northern Louisiana, and then you go just out off the coast in Texas, and you're only dealing with half an inch or less of rainfall. But you go to the east of the system, and you're dealing with more around 3 to even closer to 7 inches of rainfall in a few of these locations. So again, it looks like fairly concise in terms of where the rainfall will be. It's going to be somewhere in probably eastern Louisiana through southern Mississippi, much of Alabama, Georgia, maybe even into upstate South Carolina and parts of North Carolina as well, in terms of where the highest amounts of rainfall. And then of course parts of the Panhandle, Florida as well will have some decent amounts of rainfall out of this event. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.